So today is the second class on quality control. I think that it's probably later in the week, as I have started to do some review where we would have tests. So I think it's, we use that time maybe once a week to focus on where we would have had a test, to have that actually doing test questions. So last class was quality control, and I got as far as considering the elements that are at the, so again, quality control has three phases, if you will. We have the input phase, we have the production phase, and then we have the output. So there's different levels of quality control. There's the things that you check the quality for as the inputs when they come into the factory, and then we have the actual process, and so we have to limit, and you probably remember that from the production manager video. We have to continually check the quality inside the factory, make sure the machines are inspected. We talked about the metal detector. They check it every 30 minutes. Every 30 minutes they stop it to make sure that it's working properly. Because it's not, because it's real, it's not just a show thing. And so within the process, safety is probably, the most important thing, especially for the workers also, right? We need to keep the workers safe. And then we have the output. So that means the final product needs to be checked by somebody before it goes to the customers. And all of those, the ending points actually cost more than the beginning. So if you have the right inspection system within the production process, is cheaper. It saves you money at the end on checking quality. If you have good inputs and good suppliers who also have good quality control, that saves you money on the end. You don't have to worry as much about the finished product. So if you've got a shaky factory with weird changing suppliers all the time, and maybe a work process that doesn't have a good flow, it stops and starts and there's problems, then you have a lot of money to spend in quality control in the end of the process. So all of these terms have different kinds of wording and terminology as usual. But first, let's just get our head around the feeling of what happens if we have poor quality control.
In this short topic video, we'll take a brief look at the costs that arise when a business suffers from poor quality. We know that in business things go wrong. A product breaks down, or a product's delivered late, or the quality of the customer service delivered isn't up to customer expectations. Of course things go wrong in business, but the issue with poor quality is that if it happens often enough, or if customers begin to expect it from your product or brand, then the business is likely to suffer from a competitive disadvantage compared with the competitors who have better quality. So a key point to remember about poor quality is that poor quality is a source of competitive disadvantage. There are lots of ways it happens, and I'm sure as a consumer you'll have come across some of these yourselves. A product that fails, it breaks down, or it doesn't do what it was expected to do. Perhaps it doesn't last as long as you expected it to.
Headphones. Always have problems with headphones. It's seeking quality headphones is something, if a headphone breaks easily, I give up on them pretty quickly.
A product that you order that's delivered late, or not at all, or not in a state you can use something. A product that is simply difficult to use with poor instructions. Or in the service sector, all kinds of issues of poor customer service.
A few more examples. Product that does not perform as promised. I bought a speaker, USB speaker. The bass is awful. It really doesn't work as well as I thought it would. And we also bought another one that we bought for my wife's mom, and it didn't come with a power supply. So then we had a real battle with Tiki, and they have trouble because they have to go through, some of their shops are private shops, so they have to order from the shop, and then the shop ships to the customer, and then Tiki ends up being the one who has to be responsible for the vendor. If the vendor is sending the products that are low quality, or missing pieces, are late, then people complain to Tiki. Now, of course, anybody who sells through Tiki really wants to maintain that relationship, so they should have good customer service, but that one time, it took us 1 month to get a power supply sent to us from Hanoi. It was really annoying. But my wife, now she doesn't want to use Tiki at all. She's like, I don't like Tiki, Tiki doesn't work. If they have a problem, then you can't solve it. So they choose not to use them. So the expectation has changed.
What happens with poor quality is that it results in business costs. So the key line of analysis between quality and competitiveness is that poor quality results in an increase in costs, which in turn can make a business less competitive than the competition. The kind of costs we're talking about are reworking or remaking a product or repairing it, the cost of refunding the customer for a good that was not up to scratch or service that wasn't satisfactory, the cost of replacing a good. But of course, perhaps most importantly is the last one on the screen there. It's the cost of lost customers, a reduction in customer loyalty. And maybe even worse, when customers go on to maybe social media sites and share their experience of poor quality with friends and family and acquaintances, which has an even more dramatic effect potentially.
I think those are important for an exam question. What are the costs of poor quality? You can see that coming up on a test pretty easily. So take a note. It's like I said, the customers who complain are the ones who actually cared before, so they're the saddest ones about it. I'm sure you've heard me talk about Vietjet at some point. I don't know if I've ever cost Vietjet any customers, but they really, their customer service is special, to say the least. Not only that, their apps and their websites don't work really well. So they always push you to the app and the website, and then after that you still have trouble, so you're not really solving any problems. They're saving money and you're the one who's frustrated. I do believe that at one point I probably cost, from about 2006 to 2016, my main example for this topic and task had to do with the LG company. LG, I think I cost them some money. I think if you ask most of my students from that period of time and you say the term LG or the company LG, they actually start laughing. Because I just trashed them for about half the year. I just spent every example about how LG is so horrible. And life's not good. I changed the slogan. It all comes from like an experience I had at the LG Service Center. Big sign. It's on Chan Hung Dao Street, Chan Hung Dao, big street, very expensive building. LG Service Center. Wow, they're really, stepping up to the big leagues, to have their service center downtown with that expensive rent. So I went there with an LG phone, and I had some trouble with it, and I wanted to fix it because I kind of liked it. There was something about it I liked, so I wanted to keep it. And they said to me that they couldn't fix it because it was bought in Singapore, and I said, but it's the same phone. And they said, we can only fix things in Vietnam. And then I said, well, where can I fix it in this country? And they said, we don't know, get out of our store. I was like, what kind of company is it supposed to be, is trying to be an international company and yet they can't really support people who buy their products in other countries. I just was fed up with that company. I was like, what is this? So I spent years and years and years putting in the minds of my students that LG products were ridiculous, bad quality, bad service, and generally a kind of amateur company. And I think I might have cost them, you know, hundreds of thousands and maybe millions and millions of dong over the years. I like to think so. But that's what he's talking about. Some people may even tell other customers about their bad experience. So that goes double for services, right? If there's a good service, you really want to tell people about it. And if there's a bad service, then you also want to tell people about it.
Potential. Some great examples here on the screen if you need some evidence of how poor quality can lead to significant business costs. Just reading down the line there, you can see that poor quality affects a whole variety of industries, from laptop and computer makers through to toy manufacturers, and of course we've seen in the car manufacturing industry a significant cost of poor quality, with a very high number of product recalls due to faulty parts and faulty software. Perhaps one of the most striking examples of poor quality and the costs associated with that was the mis-selling of payment protection insurance by a large number of UK-based financial institutions like banks and building societies. The costs of that failure of quality are still rising, but at the time of writing are almost £40 billion. And of course we've seen more recently shocking failures in quality in the leisure sector, such as the Alton Towers roller coaster disaster. So a key point to remember is that poor quality can result in substantial business costs, which in some cases may even threaten the viability of a business. So to summarise, poor quality essentially damages a business's competitiveness, particularly if it's sustained. Every business will suffer from the occasional lapse in quality, that's to be expected. But if it's sustained, then that's bad news, because it leads both to financial costs, but more importantly in the long term to damaged business reputation and a loss of customer loyalty. So when we look in future videos at how quality can be managed through quality control and quality assurance, a key point to remember is you're trying to avoid the costs of poor quality.
And naturally, it's almost like a hygiene factor for most people, right? He was saying that the issues of the expectation is that it's maybe getting you a competitive advantage, but if it doesn't come up to what people expect, then it's more noticeable and it actually becomes a competitive disadvantage. So that's very much like Hertzberg, right? From a customer point of view. Okay, so last class, I left off discussing page 154 and the importance of having the specifications correct. The specifications for quality control are necessary if you're producing it, or even perhaps more importantly, if it's being produced and outsourced. Because if you order it wrong, you get what you ordered and it's wrong, then actually in their contract, you are responsible for paying that. So you have to make sure you order it perfectly well from your manufacturer so they cannot say that they did it right and you had it wrong. So, so imagine the size of the quantities of electronics, iPhones, Nike shoes, and to have one detail wrong about the specification means the details of the final product, then, or even just a simple thing like the color or a misspelling, oh Lord, you can really ruin and create a lot of waste really quickly. So coming from that, that's the first thing. For whatever production process you're using, you really have to have your recipes or your specifications correct. If you're doing job production, then perhaps you're an expert, but you still have some kind of, you go to the tailors and you see they write in the notebook all the numbers, and it's, you know, it's pretty informal, but you know, the more expertise the maker has, then of course the less data that they need to record. But when you get to batch production, like someone's going to run your bakery and they have to be able to bake the same kind of cake every single day with the same quality and same taste every single day, then the recipes have to be perfect, exact. Customers will not accept menus where the food changes its taste and quality every day. Then you get up to big flow and mass production, and of course, you really need to have a lot of specifics for that. So, okay, so now we're going back to the beginning. So we have the you know, specification would be like the first pre-stage before raw materials. So raw materials is, you're checking those before you start, right? You should have a quality criteria before you start choosing your suppliers. So I'll go through this real quick. There's going to be 3 terms of planning involved with these 3 steps. High quality raw materials must be used to produce high quality products. This can be difficult to manage, of course, because there's the balance, and I think I emphasized it before, but I want to emphasize it again. There's a balance between quality suppliers and cost. Shareholders want lower cost. The people who make who manufacture, they want to make the best products that they can make. So there is always a tension between cost and quality. And profitability, of course. So quality is definitely a long-term way of thinking, right? Shareholders think short-term. They should think long-term, but many of them think short-term, whereas quality control and good systems of quality control are definitely long-term plans for profitability. Companies have to often have a criteria for raw materials and a preferred supplier list. So those are developed in the logistics department, and using your trusted suppliers is what you want, but you never know when you're going to have a logistics breakdown and you have to have some backups. So you should always have backup suppliers. A basic check of the raw materials is to compare the materials delivered to the purchaser. For example, inspect it. It's called an inspection. So that's true if you're receiving output from a bookstore. You still have to see, count, check. You never just take the boxes from the delivery and say, okay, thanks, here's your money, bye. You always got to inspect it and make sure that it's what was ordered. Paragraph 4, the quality control of raw materials before going into the production process can be difficult to manage. If there are defects or substandard materials, in particular, returning these materials to the supplier can be very complicated, and it also depends on what kind of system of payment you have. Do you have delayed payment to your suppliers? So that would mean that it might be easier, but if you've already paid them, then it could be very difficult. And because of this, you might find yourself delayed in production. Delays in production mean idle resources. Factory not working, staff not working, fixed cost continuing. And so all of those things are happening when you're not running your production line. So any break in suppliers will affect, could be a substantial cost. As a result, there could be pressure to just use the substandard materials to keep up with your deadlines and not lose your quarterly profit targets or shareholder expectations. This involves an argument between not only cost but quality and efficiency. So are we going to maintain our what's that called again? The percentage of our capacity used of our production, or are we going to let it sit idle and not use it? If the substandard materials are used, risk poor quality, You might get lucky, maybe one bad batch, but the final product generally will not meet the quality specifications and therefore can have a massive risk of coming back to haunt the company. I think that's what happened with those Boeing airplanes, right? The Boeing airplane group, they changed one part of the airplane because they couldn't fit the new engine under the wing. So they had to shift it up a little bit, but that affected the balance of the airplane. Everything else in the airplane was pretty much the same. So they did like a sticker on the manual, like basically the same as the old one, and they put an automatic balancing thing into the plane to keep the wing from going up too much, which was what was happening. So they tried to do that from an autopilot instead of a manual, letting the pilots know about it. And of course, they were in competition with the Airbus. The Airbus was blasting out airplanes and the Boeing was late in its production and the orders were piling up, and so they decided to go for it and try to do this quick fix to solve a problem and not really train the pilots, because that takes another 6 months to retrain the pilots with a new system. And as a result, they had 2 huge crashes, and the crashes were for the exact same reason, and production basically, orders went down, production went down, and Boeing is suffering, it's embarrassing, I'm a little bit nervous being on a Boeing airplane. If there's one place that you expect quality control to be the tightest that it can actually be, it's in the production of airplanes. So they shifted the specifications. They didn't have the time to redevelop it the right way, and they ended up creating some system that was new and not quite understood by the pilots. So even the pilots, when they had problems, they couldn't understand why. They're like, what's happening? We'll try what we know, and it made the problem worse. So that goes into actually the specifications and design as well. All right, this is the first term. It's called feed forward. Control of feed forward means control of the prototypes and the design. So you have to know that it works, right? That's why you go through the production development process, the product development process, so you know that what you're producing has the right specifications and it performs as it's supposed to. So feed forward controls include the design, the engineering, but also, of course, the planning for the supplies that are and the raw materials to produce. So this careful planning before production begins. In this way, problems can be anticipated and solutions prepared for. You don't want to go and shift in the middle of your production and then have to say, oh, wow, we have to train all the pilots now? Okay. An example of this is a bakery using a recipe and making sure that all the ingredients and the equipment are clean and suitable, as well as high quality before making the bread. So that's feed forward. That's the first style of quality checks, or its planning phase. Some people call that quality assurance, which will come up again a little bit. Actually, it's probably best to do it now.
Hi, in this topic video, we're going to take a look at another aspect of quality management, and it's an approach that tries to ensure that quality is built into a product or service. It's called quality assurance. And don't forget, there are 2 broad or main approaches to a business trying to ensure that the product or service meets the needs and expectations of customers. One is called quality control. Quality control is all about inspection, trying to find the defective products before the customer gets them. The alternative is quality assurance, and there's a clue in the word assurance. It's about trying to organise the business, the way that operations are organised, and all other aspects of the business's processes to try and ensure that quality is built into the process, that you can be assured, you can rely on the business to deliver a quality product without having to inspect the whole time. So quality assurance is subtly different from quality control to deliver.
Worthy of notes. Quality control is after checking to make sure that before the next customer or step happens in the process, that any defective items are removed. Whereas quality assurance is the feed forward, basically feed forward style, where you understand all your specifications, processes, and raw materials before, and you build that up so you can have an expectation that the quality will be good in the end. Good processes, good planning.
A quality product without having to inspect the whole time. So quality assurance is subtly different from quality control. Quality assurance is about the processes that a business puts in place to ensure that production quality meets the needs of customers. And the aim with quality assurance is to try to organise all aspects of operations so that the chance of a substandard or poor quality product or service is minimised, ideally eliminated altogether. Now this is a really tough thing to do, and you can imagine it can't be done overnight. So a key focus of quality assurance is to look at every aspect of the production process, in particular right at the start, at the design and development stage, and try to ensure that all aspects of needed quality are built into every stage of the production process.
So I think the aim, and knowing the development stage, that's all you really need to note down. This is Sunday. It's the last day before the super hard lockdown, crazy lockdown, double lockdown. I am fighting people on the streets to get food and items. It's quite weird. I don't really know how this is gonna, I hope it works, I really do.
Process. Therefore, you can see that there is a difference between quality assurance and quality control. If you've seen the revision video on quality control, you'll know that the focus is all upon sampling and checking output. And it's very much targeted at production activities. It's very much about setting standards and then checking a sample of output to see whether the standard has been met. Quality assurance is quite different. It almost acts at the business level, at the cultural part of the business. It's about how a business can organise itself to build quality into all aspects of production. And it does this by looking in minute detail at every part of the production process. It's not just production, it's not just operations, but of course it can be other aspects as well. For example, the HR function, to what extent is training supporting quality in the business? For example, finance, to what extent is finance supporting quality throughout the business? An example of quality assurance is a thing called TQM. Let's just spend a minute having a think about what TQM is. TQM is an acronym that is short for Total Quality Management. Again, a clue in the title, Total Quality Management. And this is, if you like, a philosophy towards how you manage the business. Focus on a concept called continuous improvement. And the idea of TQM essentially is that the culture of the business is organised to constantly try and find ways of improving the way that things are done.
Total quality management is, it's kind of picked up from Kaizen again. So there's 3 different styles of quality management. One is Kaizen, one is called lean production, which really focuses on minimizing costs, and total quality management, which are all very similar in how they make their approach. Of course, total quality management attempts to start the process with good planning and quality assurance, trying to use the terminology, quality assurance, but even after that has a Kaizen approach and tries to keep the workforce involved in being aware of problems and different quality issues that may arise. Kaizen is a little bit more similar to lean production in the sense that it focuses on updating processes to make them more efficient based on worker ideas, which can happen in total quality management, but it's a little less rare. But the workers are involved. That's the main point. All the workers and the whole organization is involved in the process. Total quality management.
So TQM is an example of quality assurance. You don't need to know lots of detail about it, but certainly pick up 1 or 2 points. A great feature of TQM, if it can be achieved successfully, is that all employees in the workforce are involved, not just those involved in production. So everybody in the workforce is looking out for quality, looking out for improvements in quality. And quality, the culture is that quality is expected, almost 100% quality level. If you can get this right, of course, and it's not easy, then this can be a very effective and very profitable way of organising your business, because it completely eliminates the need to inspect quality. And because employees are so deeply involved in production processes and all aspects of the product, it certainly empowers them and makes them much more motivated to deliver a high quality output. The downside of TQM, of course, is that this is tough. To have a culture.
So note the last point, eliminates some of the cost of inspection. So, like I said before, the more care and attention that's put into processes, the less needs to be worried about inspection at the end.
The downside of TQM, of course, is that this is tough. To have a culture of a business that underpins total quality requires very strong leadership, a dedication, almost an obsession to quality, and you can't do it on the cheap or in the short term. It requires a substantial investment in training and support so that everybody in the organisation or the business knows what the quality assurance program is trying to achieve. Just one more to mention when it comes to quality assurance, it's a concept called Kaizen. Another kind of quality assurance, and here, in essence, every employee is engaged and empowered to look for lots of small ways in which they can make a change to the way things are done, which will result in higher quality, improved quality processes. That's been an introduction to and an overview of an important concept in operations management called quality assurance. If you
Does anyone else not like the word Monday? It's not really the word I like to focus on. We did a lot of this before. Beautiful picture here that we can imagine. All right, so then that's the pre-production phase mostly, and then we're looking at the production phase. I'm on page 155. There are quality control at points in the production process as well. And when we saw the farm production manager, we saw that he checked the vegetables in the ground. So that was feed forward. And then he checked the production process and looked where the workers were, checked the machines. And then he went and looked at the bag with the finished product and checked the label. So he did all three kinds of inspections there. So the production process can have a lot, especially if you're doing Kaizen or total quality management. I think there was a point where he said that the process can become very bureaucratic. And the idea that that means is that you do too much inspection and then you have too many documents and too many archives of every single thing that happened, and you spend more time trying to record what's happening as opposed to actually producing. So I know that this happened a lot in the American medical industry, and the doctors are just swamped in paperwork. The doctors spend 50% of their day in paperwork instead of helping patients because there's so many checks, there's so many things happening. Is it really helping at that point? I don't know, maybe it's too much. There are quality control at points in the production process. Operation checks ensure that production machinery and equipment are working as they should. This may involve automated technologies such as the metal detector that we saw. Temperature is definitely going to be something you want to check in the refrigerators. Any kind of cameras that can find defects in products. Employees may also monitor how the plant and equipment is operating. So you're checking the assembly line, you're checking the products by eye, you're checking the meters of temperature and weight, for example. The weight has to be perfect for each kind of vegetable that you are selling. And also how the equipment is operating. Does it have enough power, right? You have a power supply that runs the whole supply chain. That would be a problem if it stopped. So there's all kinds of elements of the chain that need to be checked, operation checks during the production process. A combination of automation and human checks. Quality control involves checking the quality of the product at different stages of the production process. So there is the quality control of the final product, and then if there's assembly, there's quality control of different parts of the product. Those kind of controls are called concurrent. So we had the feed forward controls here. The feed forward is coming into the system as quality assurance, and then within quality control goes from the beginning of the production process until the end of the final output. And then quality improvement actually should be within the planning. It could be the planning, but it also is part of the production and part of understanding the KPIs at the end and how it's working. So actually, I would probably put quality improvement either on top of these elements or within the production process, which you can call lean production. It's very similar. Or Kaizen. So those kind of Kaizen, lean production would be in between. Concurrent controls are used during the production process. An example is the baker who checks. They have a little window on the oven which helps the baker to check the bread and to make sure that it's rising properly. The production line may scan products with magnets and metal detectors to make sure that there's no metal in the products. Samples can be pulled out of the process to check them. I think the production manager, he used the word sample the entire time when he looked at different products. There may be automated cameras and employees as well, visually inspecting products as they pass through a production line. We saw that. They weren't taking a lot off, but they were looking for things that were clearly not quite good enough. That can be discarded or improvements made to the production process to fix the problem, called Kaizen. So that's inside the process. Concurrent, I think it's a relatively easy word to remember, concurrent. Then, when you get to this stage here, and you've already started the quality control on different parts of the process, but the actual real first idea of quality control was the final testing of the product. Final testing is on page 156, and it says that it's called feedback. So you have feed forward ideas about checking the specifications, checking the raw materials, the suppliers, and then you have concurrent, which is basically checking on the processes as they occur to make sure they're functioning properly. And then you have quality control, which is to look at and get a feel for the quality of the final product before it gets sent out. This involves checking the final product. Feedback. Feedback controls occur after the production process. It can involve testing the final product. You might test them all, right? If you have an expensive product like a car, you're going to turn the car on and make sure that it runs, check the functionality of the basic elements of it. Maybe a phone, you check almost all of them, or at least do some kind of checks to turn them on and off or whatever, just to make sure they actually function. And then there's some that you probably only check 1 out of every 10. Things that don't have a lot of electronics to them, or pottery, or chairs, or desks, or tables. You don't feel like you need to check every one of them. But that's a cost trade-off, right? That's the cost of inspection versus the efficiency, again, of finishing the production process. This can involve final testing a product, like a final checklist and of things that need to function properly before it can be delivered, or even collecting customer feedback can be part of this quality control. Are you satisfied? What can be improved, etc. In an IT business, quality control involves verifying the outputs conform to the required specifications. The IT product, database, software, animation is checked against the customer requirements. So that's all the specifications, right? They all come back. With testing and code inspections to ensure that they meet the agreed requirements, especially important for outsourcing. If you're outsourcing anything, you have to go back and have this checked against the final specifications and requirements. Before the goods are handed over, it will be tested to ensure they run smoothly under different conditions. There may also be conflict between quality and that's cost and efficiency at this stage. Of course, deciding if you can sell something, if you decide you cannot sell it, that's loss. So if you're too strict in your quality control, then you might have a lot of issues with cost. So, or you can send them to another country and do dumping of all the poor quality product, right? That leads to some question about ethics. Okay, so I think the main other thing I was interested in going through today, just one more thing, was to look at that idea of continuous improvement and lean production. Here there's another section on quality assurance. I think you should feel pretty good about that from the last section. A couple good examples. when you're designing a second paragraph of quality assurance, in designing websites, there are quality standards that must be met to ensure the design is right. These standards can be applied to all website projects as part of quality assurance. So they have to work with tablets, they have to work with phones, different kinds of websites. They have to be functional with touch screens. Not just one type of web browser, but different types of web browser. They might have spell checks, they have, there's certain things that maybe make one website your style or your quality for your company of website design. I know that tailors in Vietnam have a certain kind of training, that this kind of training makes their tailoring very specific, and people can recognize it across the world because of its particular style of stitching. I think it's the stitching, the way that they do the stitching, and it's got a good reputation for good quality. So if you build into the kind of system that you are producing, a kind of stitching that is, got a competitive advantage, then that competitive advantage will stay with the company. If you have a brewing process that brews the beer differently from another company, that'll give you an advantage in the final product as well, and something that's into your process that other people cannot copy very easily. The rest of it, yeah, okay. Then we'll talk about improvement for a minute here. Businesses look to continuous improvement. So there's another word they throw around with Kaizen, continuous improvement, meaning that you're always trying to get better, cheaper, slightly more efficient. A continuous improvement in their production processes, as this will result in products and services of higher quality, customer loyalty, attracting new customers, lots of benefits. Streamlining, eliminating waste, improving inspections, skilling the workforce so they're involved in the process. So all of those things cost money. Again, they're repeating themselves here. They say, but I guess we should learn the language. A company must have a baseline to compare against. A baseline is like a KPI. So it means that, okay, so how much did it cost us to produce 10,000 items this year? So you can compare how fast or what capacity can the factory run at per day, 200 items per day. Can we improve it to 220 items a day? So these are the kind of baselines that you need in order to set targets, in order to measure your continuous improvement. So you can also do that relative to your competitors. You can look at your competitors and say, okay, our competitors are more efficient than we are. How can we become more efficient? So baselines. And when you need to keep your baselines and maintain your specifications while you try to improve your baselines. There is some language. But that does, as it says on the page of 157, lead to a situation where you may, in fact, be improving your business to the point that you have a built-in competitive advantage over other companies. Once again, of course, we have the same kind of issue with quality versus profit, right? There's a battle there that goes on.
a look and provide an overview of a concept called lean production. Lean production is essentially a management approach, and the aim of lean production is to try to find ways of cutting out the variety of different kinds of waste in a business, but without compromising on product quality.
I think this is a good bridge to the next subject, which is how to run inventory controls, because of course you're trying to eliminate and limit your waste in an inventory situation as well. And that's inventory for supplies coming in, how much is sitting around in the factory waiting to be sold, how much is in storage and warehouses. So there's a lot of issues with how you deal with inventory that are similar, or at least have the same goal as lean production.
In essence, lean production, the different methods of applying it, are all about doing things better in a business, doing the simple things well, and importantly, involving those involved in the business, the employees, in identifying all those small changes in the way things are done that as a result can reduce waste and therefore reduce business costs. There are lots of reasons why business would want to cut out waste, but essentially it all comes down to one thing, which is that waste in a business involves cost, and if there's excess waste, there is excess cost, and therefore lower profit to the business. This is an approach that needs to be avoided at all times. Excess costs, poor quality, high waste is usually a recipe for a business that will be uncompetitive. There are various examples, aren't there, of different kinds of waste in business. For example, if we were thinking about inventories and production, or stocks, overproduction of those stocks or inventories can lead to the build-up of excess stocks. Too much stock, not enough demand, and in time that can lead to stock write-offs and further losses, and also the additional costs of storing and handling that stock, all as a result of overproduction, wasteful production. Waste can also involve time. For example, it might well be there's been an investment in a production line that's lying idle, not being used, or the production line is not being used as much as was anticipated when we went through the investment appraisal for the production line. Any time where there's people standing idle, waiting for production process to be completed, or assets not being used efficiently, that's waste, that's excess cost. And of course, perhaps the most important and potentially significant example of waste in business is defective output. Output that is not up to the required standard of quality. And this is often the case. You find this a lot in businesses that are uncompetitive, a high level of substandard or defective outputs.
This is why this is the bridge for the two topics. So we're going from quality control to inventory control. Stocks means inventory control. Maybe you have a good thing going and you think, oh, this is great, we're going to produce as many as possible, but then they don't sell or something happens or external issue happens, too many mooncakes. That's called overproduction. And here we also have stocks. These are called buffers. Buffer stocks are the stocks that you hold to make sure that you don't go down to zero. So you have just a little bit extra, or you have a lot extra that you hold on to maintain your production process without running out of materials. So of course, waiting time and defects are issues in product and production quality. So this is why it's a bridge. I think that we'll just stop here for today. I think it's a pretty good place to stop. And we'll continue and pick it up next class with this and inventory control. Everybody, I hope you're well. I miss you guys. All right, stay safe.